Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Ultimate Named Ranges. In this comprehensive training, we're going to be going over how to create named ranges, how to use named ranges, whether it's in formulas or cells or even in VBA. And we're going to wrap that all in this functional invoice payments feature, where we've got a ton of payments and, of course, an invoice list. And we're going to tie that all together in a nice little application. So I hope you'll join us. It's going to be an amazing training. All right, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate that. I've got a really cool invoice and payments application, but most importantly, we're going to show you everything about named ranges and how powerful they can be in your applications and how they can make your programming faster, less errors, and more productivity, which is all what we want in Excel. So we're going to show you how that is done. Before I get to that, I wanted to make sure that you are subscribing to our channel and hitting that notifications bell. I create these amazing trainings each and every Tuesday, and I want to make sure you get alerted right away when I do. The best way to do that is to subscribe to our channel and click the notification icon bell. That way I can notify you each and every training. Also, launching this month is our incredible Excel for Freelancers mentorship program. We are creating an incredible application, an accounting application. I want you to be a part of that. In fact, I want to show that to you right now, what we have done so far, and hopefully you can be a part of that. And we're just in the beginning, so I would really love your feedback. And let me show you, we've got an admin screen that we've already completed. It's going to be an incredible application where we've got general info, company info, user settings, and right, it's going to be a multi-user application. So we're going to show you how to create your own multi-user applications and all the settings that can go. A comprehensive user list where you will be able to create user roles, multiple users. So it's really going to be great. We have conditional formatting that you've never seen before. All, of course, accounting defaults, payment terms and method, vocabulary, the ability to name your own customer, name your own vocabulary here. So for example, if we change this to customer, it automatically changes in your application. See, this menu item changed automatically and we change it back. So it's going to be that way throughout the application. So it's going to be really incredible training where we show you how to create vocabulary in your own language. So also we have sharing and sync feature, emails and notification defaults, client settings, vendor settings, custom fields for vendors, items, purchasing defaults, invoicing defaults, and a customer information screen just in the design phases. So it's going to be a really, really powerful general info. So that's just the very beginning of this incredible accounting application. I'll include the links down below if you want to join us for the mentorship program. I want to teach you how to define, design, develop, and deploy your own Excel applications so you can get passive income. All right, thanks so much. Let's get into the training now. I've got ultimate named ranges. Named ranges are super powerful in your application, and I want to make sure that you understand. Most of you have used named ranges, but I wanted to create a comprehensive training that just focuses on the named ranges. So hopefully you'll learn some new things in this. We're going to start out real basic and then go up from there, and then we're going to get into how we can work with named ranges in VBA. And of course, named ranges can be found here into the formulas name manager. We can have all of our named ranges. Those are the unhidden named ranges, of course, and we're going to get into that in a little bit later on. Through this name manager, we can create a new one. We can also, of course, edit a specific one just by clicking edit. And then we can also delete any named ranges using delete. You can also filter them based on a scope of the worksheet. If named ranges are created just on a specific worksheet, they'll show up here. And of course, if they're on the entire workbook, they'll show up here. Generally, I use just a workbook because I want my named ranges to be available through whatever screen that I'm working on. So keep that in mind. And also, we can also understand table names, defined names, and names with errors and without errors. So if you want to delete all the names with errors, you can just select here and then any names with errors and we can delete them. So that can be really helpful in named ranges and clearing the filter. So this gives us a way to go around named ranges. Now there's a pretty cool shortcuts also if we want. So really there's three main types of named ranges. And the first is just a single cell. So you can create a single cell named range, and the best way to do that is just to click on any cell. And if we want to create a named range, we can go up in here in the named range, just click total, invoices, and there's a named range right there. So now when you see this selection and we want to find out total invoices, we can just click here and it's going to select that cell 03. We can then refer to this in invoices or on the sheet, and of course it is also now available in the name manager. If you want to find this name manager through a quick shortcut key, you can use Control F3. So Control F3 is also going to launch that name manager real quickly. So it's a very, very helpful shortcut. If you want to create a named range from a selection, let's say I want to create a payment notes and I want to create a named range based on this selection, we can use a shortcut called Control Shift F3. So Control Shift and F3 is going to create automatically a named range. It's going to let us know now create from selection. If it's the top row, from values in there, we can create a name based on that. And now when we look at that back into the named range, again, Control F3 is going to show us that named range, and it just created a named range here called payment notes. So as you've seen in this example, this named range is based on a list of, and we can delete it now just by clicking delete. So we can see a named range can be based on a single cell. It can also be based on a list. And this is great if you have a fixed list and you can use that list within your application. For example, I have a payment type, this list here. This is based on the named range. So if we look into data and data validation, we'll take a look at this and we'll see that the list is pay type. This is the second type of named range, which is a fixed range. The range does not change. In fact, I've got the original range right here. A quick way, if you're not sure where to get that shortcut and you want to look at it, you can just go into data validation and then click and then tab down, and it's going to show you right where that pay type is. Another way to quickly access it, of course, is through Control F3, which is going to launch our name manager. Selecting on pay type and tabbing over also is going to let us know exactly where that list is located. So fixed lists and fixed cells are a great way. There are other types. What if it grows? What if our list is growing? We want a dynamic range. So that means as our list grows, we want it to grow too. For example, we can do that through a dynamic range. Into the formulas name manager, let's take a look at one of those dynamic ranges. We're going to use offset. I like offset. It's really helpful as a formula, and let's dive into that. For example, we have in here payments, and let's go look under payments customers. That is a dynamic named range. So if we tab into that, we'll see that it covers all of this. And now if we go out of that and we create a new payment, we can just enter the payment amount and payment type and click save. And now if we take a look at that name range under the formulas name manager and go to payment customers and tab over, we see that this now named range encompasses all the data. So this grows as the data. Let's go ahead and create one. I've got a data sample here, and let's just say we want to track all the sales representatives. So the best way to go about it is just to highlight the cells into the formulas. Name manager, you can also create new from selection. That's another way to do it, name manager. But I want to create a brand new one using an offset formula, which is going to be dynamic. So let's go into new, and we'll call it test customer. And then what I want to do is I want to create it, I want it to grow as our data grows. So we're going to use the offset for that. The best way is just to copy whatever you have here. Start it out with offset formula. It's going to help us. And we need a starting point where our offset is. So D3 is going to be our starting point. And then we're not going to offset it any rows or columns. So we're going to use comma 3 times and then count A. What do I want to count? I need to know the number of rows. So how many rows? Well, we're going to start out with our first row here and go all the way down, but it's probably going to encompass a lot of data. So we want to make sure that the last row, of course, encompasses all the potential data. So you can use a larger number to make sure it covers all your data. And then close parentheses and then comma 1. That's going to be the column 1 call. And then just to check, you'll tab out and tab into it and make sure those dancing ants cover all of the data that's there. Click OK, and you now have your named range. And if we tab over in here, we see that it counts all of the cells. Dynamic named ranges are great, but they are not without problems. For example, so if we look in the formulas and name manager, I'm going to pin this down here so we can see it. In the name manager, we see there's no errors or anything like that with the one we just created, test customers. However, if we were to delete all the data in here, if we delete the rows, if we right click and then just click delete, and now we take a look at the name manager and we look under the customer, we see that there's a ref now. That can be a problem, and that can create issues. So I'm going to show you a way to get around that type of ref error. And this is if you regularly delete data, especially delete that first row, it could create a real problem for you in your data. So let me show you a way to get around it. I'm going to copy our data back over into it, our test data here, and then we'll just. So how do we get around that? The best way to get around that is to include the headers in a dynamic named range. And so let me show you how to do that. If we're going to create another one, we're going to select all the cells just temporarily, name manager, and then new one. So I want to create a brand new one. And again, we're going to use offset, but this time we're going to include the headers as well. Although we're not going to include the header data, we're going to include the headers in our formula. So offset data sample, this time we're starting at 2. We're going to comma, except I want to offset it 1 row down. So the starting point is 1 row below D2, then comma, comma. Okay, so basically we're taking in consideration the header row, but not including it within the data. Then count A, then I want to count, but what I also want to make sure I count, I want to include the header row as a formula. So we're going to count that. And then of course, again, a high row, I want to include all of them. So we'll go 9, 9, 9, 9. Now we're going to end parentheses and then -1. Since I'm counting the header row, but I want to make sure to subtract 1 because the header row is not part of our data. Good. So now comma 1 and then close parentheses. Now click OK, and to test it, we can tab over and we want to make sure that, again, you see it encompasses the data just as we want to. So now close this, and now we're going to take a look. Now let's delete the rows here. I'm going to delete the same rows here, right click, delete, and let's take a look at that named range compared with the other one. So name manager, and now we see the test customer course contains the error, but our sales representative doesn't contain any error or any ref, which is really great. And as soon as we add in more data, it'll be fine. So let's just say we add in a little bit of data here. And now we look under the name manager and we go back to our sales representative, we see that it covers our data. So there's no error when we include the headers. So make sure to do that. That's a great way to avoid error. So I always, anytime there's a dynamic list that potentially could delete the rows or clear the data, especially in the first row, I always am in the habit of including the header row, which will never change or be deleted, hopefully. And so in that case, you will not have errors. So that's a great way to avoid errors with dynamic data using the offset when rows are potentially deleted. All right, let's bring back our sample data here and go over a few more samples. All right, so now that we have our sample in there, so we can also include a header. So we know that now we can also use named ranges and formulas. Sometimes it's really hard to recognize, especially when the formulas get large, to understand what's going on. So let's show you a few examples of how we can use named ranges in formulas. Before I do that, well, I've given this a named range, and this named range is called payment invoice number. Payment invoice number. I've given this a named range as payment customer. So if we want to, for example, let's say we want to know the total invoices for this customer, what do I need to do? What I want to do in this case is I want to count all the invoices for this customer. So basically I want to look for that customer name and I want to count all the invoices or all the time where this shows up. And I've created some named ranges for this invoice list. Let's go over some of the named ranges into the name manager. And also you'll notice one of the most important things is using good naming policies when you create your named ranges. I've got two different lists here, one for payments and one for invoice. So I want to make sure to keep those separate. Notice that the invoices, those named ranges for the invoice list all start with invoice. So invoice customers, invoice numbers, and invoice total. So they all start. So each one of them is clearly defined, and whereas the payments, in the payments table, if we have payment amounts, payments customers, And we have payments invoice numbers. So each one of them is clearly defined. When you're naming your named ranges, make sure you start with at least a sheet or perhaps a table and then the column. So make sure, however you decide to do it, make sure they're clearly identified so that you can look at a list of name ranges and clearly know exactly where this name belongs. So it should be very, very clear. I try to avoid, me personally, I try to avoid using named ranges for entire tables often, because when I want to associate a specific column, I want to look at that name range and I want to know exactly what column is, instead of offsetting a specific column. So when we use these in formulas, it's really easy to know what's going on. For example, I want to count the total number of invoices for a specific customer. So we can use count if in this. I'm going to count. What am I counting? The range, the invoice, the customers. I want to know all the customers. And what is our criteria? It's the payment customer, which is this customer here. So we're counting all of the invoice customers, which is all the customers on the invoice list here. And that's all we're doing. And it's going to count the number. Very, very simple. And especially as opposed to when you see range. And of course, since this payment customer, since these invoice customers here are actually dynamic, it'll grow as our list grows. Now I also want to know the total payments. I want to know how many payments this is made. And basically what I want to do is I want to look up all the payments here. Any payment that is associated with with this customer, Sally in this case, I want to total that. So if Sally's made one for $275, one for $200, and then $500 and $100, I want to know that total. I want to know that that total is $1,075. So I can do that using named ranges within the formula. So in this case, when we click on it, we can see the payments of the customers. We're summing the range, and the criteria is the payment customer, which is located here in F7. So basically, I'm going to take this range, take this customer, and I want to total all the payment amounts. So when we use named range, it's extremely clear what we're doing as opposed to name ranges. And if we're using dynamic, it always grows. So we don't have to make any changes. And again, with total outstanding, it gets a little bit more complex, but all we're doing in this case is I am going to take all of the invoices, total all the invoices, and then apply them to, and then subtract that. All the payments are going to be subtracted from that. So we can do that with this formula. Sum if. So we're going to sum if. What is the range? We're looking for customers, invoice customers, based on the payment customer here in F7. And what are we going to total? We're going to total all of the invoices. Invoice total, all in the invoice sheet. And we're going to subtract that. I want to subtract that by all the payments that customer has made. Again, we're looking up, this time we're going to look up the customer name here within the payments, and the criteria we're going to use again is the same customer name here, but this time we're going to total up, we want to sum up all the payments amounts, which is located in column I. So I want to sum all the payments that a specific customer has made. When we do that, we know the total outstanding. We get the total invoices minus the total payments is going to give us our total outstanding balance. So we have that right here using named ranges. It's very powerful. It's much easier to look at a formula using named ranges than it is if they're just the sheet ranges. All right, next up, so we have that. We also have invoice balance. In this one, I want to know basically the total payments is subtracted from the invoice amount. So I want to know all of the payments made against a specific invoice based on the payment amount, based on that invoice amount. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I want to locate the invoice total. We're going to index that. We're going to use the row. We're going to locate the row using the invoice number here in F5. And we're going to look it up on the invoice numbers. We're going to use a match, exact match. And in that case, I want to index it, make sure it's column 1, and I'm going to subtract that invoice amount from all of the payments. And those payments, we can sum those payments. We're going to look up the payments by customer using the index payment, using sum if, the range here, and then the criteria would be the payment customer and then the payment amount. So using named ranges, see how clear that is, what we're doing. It really helps when we're looking in formulas. All right, so we see how named ranges can be used in formulas. But what if I want to list all the name ranges? I want to have all the name ranges. A great way to do that, to list all the name ranges, and have them in a specific cell. And the best way to do that is to use in formula and click paste names. And what that's going to do is if we paste lists, it's going to paste all of the names and then of course all of the formulas or references here. It's going to show us all the named range, at least those that are not hidden. We're going to go over hidden in just a little bit later. So that is a great way to get a list of all the name range inside a sheet or inside some cells in Excel. So that's a great way we can do that. So that'll list all names. Let's move into VBA. Let's move into VBA. There's a lot we can do inside VBA with named ranges, and I wanted to go over some of those things. So into the VBA, if you're not familiar with it, into the Developers tab, clicking Visual Basic. You can also use the shortcut Alt F11. If you don't have the Developers tab, you can find that through File and then Options. And then you can click the Customize ribbon here, and you can find them in the Developers tab. Just make sure this is selected. All right, so moving on, let's get into the Developers tab, and I have two modules here. One is the named range modules, and one's the payment macros. Now I'm not gonna focus on the payment macros. You can see this for yourself. Feel free to download this workbook for free, and it just shows you how to do that. We've covered most of these things already, so I'm not gonna cover it. I want this training to be focused specifically on named ranges. Of course, feel free using the links in the description, either with Facebook or email, you can get this workbook delivered to you for free. If you want a lot of my workbooks, in fact, I've got over 100 workbooks into the 100 workbook zip file. I've got an application you can purchase. It's just $37. And right now, I don't know how long I'm going to have that available, but right now there's a bonus of 20 workbooks. So in actuality, you're going to get over 120 workbooks for just $37. So if that's something you want, go ahead and I'll include the link down below as well on that. All right, let's get into it. Some of the VB things we can do with named ranges. Well, the first thing we can do is we can create a brand new named range based on a workbook scope. So for example, with sheet 3 is our sample data here. If I want to create a named range just based on a specific name, then I want that reference to be for the workbook, the scope to the workbook. Again, this workbook scope, remember we can see this has a workbook scope. Some would be, we would be create a new, like if we want to create a worksheet scope, we could just select a specific sheet that it would be focused on. But we'd like to keep them on workbooks so we can use them throughout. All right, so within VBA, let's go ahead and look at, we can create a brand new, very simple way to do it under workbook scope. There's a few ways to do that, but sheet 3 B13 name equals invoice date. That is a quick way. So when we run that code just like that, and now we look into our name manager, we see that we've got a brand new one right here under invoice date, and that's going to be a very fixed range for B3 all the way to B13. That is a quick way to create a named range inside VBA for a specific range. And that's the simplest method, and that of course is going to be for the workbook. But if you want a worksheet, let's say you want one for the worksheet, you can do that with sheet 3 name invoice dates refers to B3 to B20. So this one will create it based on a worksheet. So it's based on this sheet here. So when we run this macro and then back inside the VBA and name manager, we see now we have one that's based on the scope of the data sample. So this is worksheet based. This one created a named range automatically with VBA based on just the scope of the worksheet and not the entire workbook. All right, what else can we do in VBA? Well, we can create worksheet. We can create a hidden name. Hidden is a great way. This is really helpful when you want to secure your workbook. For example, sensitive data like passwords or usernames or things that you don't want the end user to see, they can do that, or you don't want to know the location, you can do that with a hidden. And to create a hidden one in VBA, we can do something like sheet 3 names, add name, and we create invoice dates, let's say 3, refers to, and then would be false, visible equals false. So when we run that code, and it's now created, it's been run, and if we look into the name manager, of course, it's not going to be here. It's not going to be here, which is really nice. You can refer to it, and it's not here. I'll show you very soon how to display that. So now we've created a hidden named range. It can be very helpful when trying to hide a data. Now I want to run a code that's going to show all the named range. I want to show unhide and show it. This macro was really cool. It's going to unhide all the names in the currently. So when we run this macro, it's going to take even the hidden names and unhide them. So now I just run it. Now we go into Name Manager. We see we have one here called Invoice Dates 3. That's the one that was hidden a moment ago, and now it's unhidden. And this is really powerful. I would suggest you do that. When you tend to copy workbooks and worksheets into one, there's potentially a lot of hidden named range that you didn't know about, and they could result in errors or larger workbooks or create linkage issues. So it's always a good idea to unhide all of the named ranges in your workbook, especially if you're working on a project, so that you can see all the named ranges. That they tend to, especially if you don't create your workbooks from new, you copy from one to the other, there's a lot of named ranges that can be created that are hidden. So it's a good idea to unhide that and to see them. Okay, so we now know how to hide and then unhide our named ranges. But what if I want to list all the named ranges? I want to list all the named ranges. Remember, we did that earlier. We listed all the name ranges using this. There's another way to list all the name ranges. Remember, previously we'd gone using the formula and then paste the names and then paste lists. So that's a great way. But there's another way to paste just the list, and that's through VBA. So let's go into that. So in this particular subroutine, list all named ranges, we're going to dimension the named range as a name, and then the row number. I need to keep track of all the row numbers that we're going down. We're going to start it off with row number 2. And for each named range in the entire workbook, focus on the names. For each named range, we want to do something. What do we want to do? I want to place it in column M and the row number. Of course, this row number is going to start at 2, but it's going to grow consecutively. So it's going to row. And what are we going to put there? I want to put the named range, the name of the named range. Since we've already defined this and we've set it as a named range, it's known that's going to be a named range. So I want to put, and then what I want to do is I want to increase the row number so that it won't overwrite itself. So if I click here and I click run this macro, and on sheet 3, column M, we can now see that we have all of the named ranges listed out in column. So that's really, really helpful. We'll remove that. Okay, moving on. So we now know how to list all the named ranges, but what if we want to show some hidden named ranges? Let's go ahead and hide another one. Let's delete it and hide it. Back into the sheet, named ranges, this one I'm going to delete, and I'm going to create it again. I want to create that hidden named range. Okay, so now that it's deleted, we can close that out, and we're going to go back into VBA, and I want to create that again. I'm just going to run this one, create it, and it's there, but of course it's hidden, so we will not see it in the name manager. See, there's nothing here. So what do I want to do now? Now I want to list all, let's scroll down here. I want to show all the hidden named ranges. So what do I want to do? Show just the hidden named ranges. So again, we're going to define named range as a name. Again, the row number as long, starting at row 2, and this we're going to use column N in this case. So in this case, I want to know all the named range that are visible is false, that have the visible property of false. So that means only the hidden named. So when I run this code and then we take a look on our worksheet, we see that in column N2, we now have the data sample sheet there, invoice dates 3. So that's going to show us, it's going to tell us it's still hidden in the name manager, but at least we have the ability to not necessarily unhide it, but we have the ability to know all of the hidden. So that's because some you might want to stay hidden, so we don't want to unhide it. We just want to know all the ones that are hidden. So it's going to list them all out. And if there's many more, we would create them down the list here. So that's a great technique of showing all the hidden. All right, now that we've covered that, I want to delete. We can also delete named. So let's create this work. We have one under terms, and I want to delete that. Let's double check that. Name manager. Oh, well, let's create something called terms. And I can do that here, and we can do it. Create from selection is a great way. Just click create from selection in the top row. Create the name from the values in the top row. Correct. Okay, good. Now it's done. That's a quick way to do it. Name manager, let's take a look. Here it is, terms. Okay, great. So we have now created a name ranger called terms, but I want to delete that through VBA. There might be instances where you want to delete that. Simply, this workbook names terms delete. So that's going to do, just run that code and it's going to delete it. So if we look back into our name manager here and we look down in terms, it's no longer here. So we know how to delete those names via VBA. What do we want to do next? Now I want to delete only the hidden ranges, right? I want to delete the hidden. I only want to delete the hidden ones. We can do that with this just a little bit of code. So again, we're going to define the named range as a name here. And then I want to, for each named range, for only those that are not visible, and the visible property is false, then I want to delete that. So again, let's run our code. Okay, delete, and it's clear. So I'm going to run the code that shows it. I want to first show our named ranges, show hidden named ranges, run this code. N2 will populate with that. So now let's delete that. And now what I want to do is go back into the VBA, and I want to run the macro that's going to delete the hidden. So we're going to run this macro here, and now it's deleted. Now let's take a look here. Back into Excel. Okay, there's nothing in N. Good. We want that. Now again, I want to show the hidden named range. So if we run this, nothing should appear. Back into N, and nothing is there. So now we have deleted only the ranges that are hidden. With this line of code, we can do just that. All right, what do we want to do next? Well, I want to be able to use named ranges to find a specific value. For example, in our payments here, I want to look this invoice number up, and I want to determine the customer row based on this. Take this invoice number, and I want to look it up, and I want to determine that Sally Smithers is the customer, and I want to know that that's row 6, and then I want to paste that row into B8. So let's clear whatever's here out now. B8, I want to put that row right here. So let's run that code, and then I'm going to show you how it works. Sally, of course, is located in row 6. The invoice number is in row 6. So if we look up that invoice number, I want to put row 6 here. So when we run that code, that's going to happen. Let's go through the code and see how we do that. Again, using named ranges in VBA code is very powerful, and it's also very clear. But we need to dimension a few things. The invoice range as a range, and the found invoice range as a range. And then the invoice number as a string. In this case, we want it as a string. The first thing I want to do is I want to set the invoice range to sheet 2 invoice numbers. This is our named range, invoice numbers. It's much easier and clearer to see in English the way we have it here in a clear named range so that we understand it. So if we look under sheet 2, we go into sheet 2 and we see under the name manager invoice numbers, and tab over, we see that's a clear named range and it's offset. So we can use that inside VBA, and we can call to that using the set invoice range as a range to invoice numbers. And next up, I want to also set the invoice number, the one that we're looking up, and we're going to also use another named range called selected invoice number. I believe I've changed that. Let's update that to make sure the invoice number is located here. This is the one I want, so we can copy this named range. I've updated that, and let's paste that right in here. That is the one I want to look up. Payment invoice number right here, payment invoice number. I want to find that invoice number. So how do we find it? Well, the first thing we do is we set the found invoice range. Set the found invoice range. What are we setting? And what are we going to find? We're going to look up. Where are we looking? We're looking in the invoice range. Again, that's this invoice numbers here. And what are we going to do? We're going to find it. Use the find command on this range. What are we looking for? We're looking for the invoice number. We're going to look in the values and look in whole. Then we can determine if it's been found. If not found, invoice range is nothing. Remember, when you see a double negative, not and nothing, we know to cancel each other out, and that just means if it's been found. If it's been found, then sheet 1 B8 equals the found invoice range row. This is going to place the row into B8. Now I want to put it right here into B8. So when we run that code, it's going to click on here, run it. We can see now into B8 is now 6. So the invoice row is now 6. So it looked it up and found it. So we can use named ranges inside the code to provide lookup and really help us determine the named range. So it's very, very powerful, especially in VBA. There's so much you can do. All right, so I'm really glad I got to show you this ultimate named range. There's a lot we covered here. Make sure you download the workbook. We've shown you how to use named ranges to create named ranges based on a single cell or based on a fixed number of cells. I've also shown you how to create dynamic named ranges for when data that grows, and how to prevent errors when all of that data is deleted. In this case, it was deleted to include the header row. We've also shown you in VBA how to use several methods of working with it, whether it's creating it based on the workbook scope or a worksheet scope. We also showed you how to hide named ranges and then how to recall them and unhide them, how to delete only those hidden ones, or how to show all named ranges. We could show them using both VBA and here within Excel, just simply using the use in formula and paste names. So we showed you that list as well. We also showed you how to delete a specific named range and of course the hidden named range, and of course how to find a specific value or row using named ranges in VBA code. All right, thanks so much. I hope you've enjoyed the ultimate named ranges. I'd like to see how you use named ranges in your workbook, so let us know in the comments below. Thanks so much for sharing and liking, and we'll see you next week.